biggest part of our seed order comes from a company known as Pine Tree Garden Seeds. I mean, we get tons of seeds from them. They have really, really good prices. They have organic options and heirloom open source seeds. And they're just a really good company to work with. They ship quickly, and we've never really had a problem with stuff not coming up. So I would say, you know, just in my experience, they're a really reliable seed source. So let's jump right into talking about what all we got from them. Let's see, I'm just gonna pick a random clump of seeds, talk about each one. We got several varieties of lettuce from them. Tom Thumb, Rouge d'Hiver, tennis ball lettuce, and we also had some Cimarron lettuce. I'm not really going to show every single seed packet because they have very generic packaging. They really just tell you, you know, write down what each one is and what you need to know. As far as the visual of the packaging, there's nothing exciting about it, but you know, doesn't need to have all the bells and whistles as long as they grow well. That's what's important. So tons of different varieties of lettuce. All of those are going to be grown in the spring and the fall, and maybe even some in the winter in our kitchen garden for the Free Farmers Kitchen Garden. So let's see, got some melons that are going to be in the English kitchen garden in the summertime. Noir de Carme, it's very similar to cantaloupe. It has kind of these ridge dividers, almost like a pumpkin, but it's kind of slightly darker, more greenish, but mottled in texture like a cucumber. The flesh is orange. I'm sorry, not like a cucumber, like a cantaloupe. The flesh on the inside is orange like a cantaloupe as well. So similar to a cantaloupe, but it's an heirloom, sort of a French melon that, and they happen to be organic. Got some yellow sweet Spanish onions. Those are a bulb onion. Sometimes we grow bulb onions, sometimes we grow shallots, sometimes we grow spring onions, like the bunching onions that you mostly use the stalk. We even grow leeks, so this is just one of the many varieties of onions. Beets, cylindra beets in this instance. Cylindra beets, instead of being perfectly round, are kind of tapered like a carrot, so they're interesting. Hyssop is something that we grow in our medicinal herb area because it is known to be good for cough, just like horehound is good for cough. So got this, it's a perennial, so we don't have to plant it every year, but we like to have a few extra seed packets on hand in case something like the frost kills it or something like that, you know, just to have a backup plan. So hyssop is a good one. It has a beautiful purple flower too, if it's something that you're growing, not so much because you're gonna make your own cough syrup, but just for looks, it is a pretty purple flower. We've got some Connecticut field pumpkins. That's a really old variety, probably prior to English folks being in the Connecticut area. And so we will be growing these for the fall, and hopefully if we're successful with them, we'll have some beautiful orange pumpkins to take to family frights. Which is one of our community programs we do for Halloween at Jamestown Settlement. So hopefully we'll have lots of orange pumpkins for family frights. All right, guys. Several packets of shallot seeds. There's some recipes from the time period. One of them that comes to mind is like a chicken, kind of a gravy that you would put on a roasting chicken, like you would baste it while it's roasting. And the recipe for that is in Hannah Glass, The Art of Cookery Made Plain and Easy. So I like to have shallots in the garden just because we can say, you know, hey, this is something that we're doing because it's a real 18th century recipe, and also we grew some of the ingredients. That's always really cool to be able to say. Yellow crookneck squash, that's a big one. Salsify, a lot of people have never ever heard of salsify. It is a white root vegetable. It's tapered like a carrot, but it kind of has these little tendrils that come off of it, so it's not perfectly smooth like a lot of carrots. And it's interesting because they called it oyster plant. It tastes like oysters. So one of the 18th century recipes, it says to dress salsify, And essentially you chop it and you kind of make a batter to hold it together, and you fry it like a fritter, and it's supposed to taste like fried oysters. It's really, really tasty. I've made it once before. So if we get enough abundance in our garden this year of salsify, I would love to be able to make that again, because it was really cool. Got some red cabbage. That's something that we can grow in the spring and the fall, so got several packets of that. Let's see, let's get some of these out of the way, and then we'll dive into one of these other clumps. If you're paying attention, you may notice that a lot of our stuff that goes in the kitchen garden, the English garden, comes from one source, and a lot of the stuff in the enslaved folks garden comes from a different source. I don't know if there's any rhyme or reason to that. It's just we get the stuff that we can get from where we can get it from. So that's not intentional, it's just some vendors carry different seeds. Let's do this one. Jacob's cattle beans. These are a dry bush bean that's good for growing in the heat of the summer. Their bush beans are good because if you don't want to go through the trouble of building a trellis for them, they grow without needing something to climb on, and that makes them easier to cultivate. So early Jersey Wakefield. This is one of our more common types of cabbage that we grow every year. It's an ox heart shaped head, and it's pretty cold hardy, at least in our area. So we grow this a lot, and it's something that we've been growing for years and years and years, and we have a lot of success with. So early Jersey Wakefield, it's a good one. We're gonna try to grow celery this year. We've not had a lot of success with celery in the past, just trying to get it started like in a greenhouse. But hopefully, if we start from seed, maybe we'll have a little bit better deal with it. This year we've got Golden Pascal celery. If you have tried that before, if you've grown that before and you've got some tips for us, please tell us. We check the comments. So we want to add celeries to our rotation that we do every year because it's good. We cook with it. Celery is tasty. Let's see, got a couple packets of Swiss chard. Nice green. It's something that I've noticed around here people sometimes put as like a decorative addition to like a flower bed, because it's beautiful and it's leafy and it's a good filler, but it is edible. You can cook it just like spinach. And you can add it to salads if you don't want to do that. So it's a good thing to grow in your garden at home. Got some long green cucumbers, some West India bird gherkin cucumbers. These are really cool and kooky because they are short and chunky like a gherkin pickle, but they have these little spikes on them too. That's why they're called bird gherkins. And they are something that originated in the Caribbean, as far as I'm aware. And because of that, we grow it in the enslaved folks garden. A lot of this stuff, especially in the summertime that we grow in there, came either directly from West Africa or it came from the Caribbean, because as part of the slave trade, a lot of these slave ships stopped off in the Caribbean, and a lot of times enslaved folks were kept there for a certain amount of time before they were sold to the other colonies. And so they would have picked up things like seeds, just like they brought seeds from their homeland, they would have brought seeds from stopping over in the Caribbean. And so these West India bird gherkins are something that we grow in there because of that. Another addition to the slave garden are these different shaped gourds, birdhouse gourds, long-handed dipper gourds. Sometimes free farmers got into growing gourds too, because it's something that you can grow that then you can turn into a vessel. So it's essentially free. All you have is the money and the time put into growing it. And that can be a lot cheaper than, at the time, the stuff that was being imported from England. If you think about during the Revolution, you're not getting that stuff from England anyway, or at least not very easily. So that's something that perhaps a lot of the free farmers would have been more interested in than any other time, would be to grow a few dipper gourds or a few African drum gourds, so that they have these vessels to put things in. A lot of the enslaved folks of the time, they would decorate these dried gourds by carving little geometric designs into them. and stuff like that. Something that could pass an evening before bed, something that to just, you know, all human beings in all points of history, sometimes they like to do things just for the aesthetics. They like to make things look better. The carved gourd bowls are really cool if you ever get a chance to see them. All right, we've got some collard greens. We'll grow that in the colder part of the year, like fall and winter. Some watercress, some upland cress. That's a little bit more temperature hardy. It's not as finicky as far as upland cress. It is good in cooler weather, but it'll tolerate a little bit more heat before it bolts. We've got some dwarf Siberian kale. So if you remember me talking about the lacinato kale that has the sharp pointy leaves, this is the more like conventional kale like you would get from the supermarket. All right, this is something really interesting that not a lot of people are used to today, but sometimes in specialty markets and stuff you see it. It's kohlrabi, Kohlrabi. Another word for it would be turnip cabbage, because it is part of the cabbage family. The leaves look very much like cabbage leaves, but the part of the plant that you eat is this kind of bulby part of, it's like a fruit that grows above the soil, and you kind of like slice into it or chop it up and you can cook it. So it's kind of shaped like a turnip, tastes like cabbage, hence the nickname turnip cabbage. But you can get white kohlrabi and you can get kind of the reddish purple, kind of like red cabbage. So we focus this year on just the white kind, but they do have both varieties if that's something you're interested in. Got a few leeks. That'll make a good leek soup, and some more lettuce. This one's Cimarron. That's a type of lettuce that we know that they had in the 18th century, so that's something that's pretty cool. We like it. All right, moving right along. Let's get some of these out of the way. Looks like we've got some turnips. Everybody likes a good turnip, right? So turnips are good because they can be grown in pretty much any of the cooler times of year. You can grow it even in the summertime, so it's really useful for us because we can essentially grow turnips all year round. It's not something that we have to watch a lot on as far as when we grow it. And that's helpful around here because we have not a terribly harsh winter by any means, but we do have 4 distinct seasons. So anything that can travel between seasons is good to have in our garden. So turnips are good for that too. Got some sorrel greens. Sometimes it's called dock. And so that's another green for the garden. Another type of melon. So this one I don't think that I've had the chance to grow before. This one's called a true Charante, and it is another one that is similar to the Noir de Carme because it is similar to a cantaloupe, but looks slightly different and much smaller. So gonna have fun trying that one this year. We've got some heirloom pumpkins. These are not as big as the Connecticut field pumpkins, but they are one of the ones that you can eat, but is also really cute if you're into pumpkins because they're decorative. That's not something that would have been common. Historically, they would have been growing pumpkins to eat them, not to decorate, but it's not bad to have both. Some arugula. Let's see, arugula is good. We grow it in the cooler part of the year. I didn't know until recently when I was looking into the seed order that the blossoms when arugula bolts are edible. You can put the blossoms in salads. Most of the time, if you let your greens in the garden bolt and go to seed, they're not really tasty anymore. So I thought that was an interesting thing. All right, some red cipollini onions. Red onions are good to have in the garden. Some fennel. Fennel is something that they would have used medicinally, believe it or not, for an overabundance of gas. Is what it was done for medicinally. You can also, when the seeds start to form, they're kind of sweet and taste almost like licorice. It's very strange, but it's pretty cool because it's like nature's candy. Some German giant radishes. We love radishes because they naturally deter some pests. They also have a very short seed to harvest. Some of them are as quick to grow as 28 days. This particular variety is 37 days, which is a longer, probably because they're a giant variety. They're a really big radish, but radishes are good if you're looking for quick turnover. Got some more Feverfew. Man, we got a ton of Feverfew this year. If you remember, I was talking about how the Feverfew would have been something grown as a medicinal herb. Chamomile, we know what chamomile's for. It's calming, and they knew that in the time period. So Roman chamomile and echinacea. They grew echinacea for the same reason back then as we use it today. People will get it in the vitamin and supplement section at the supermarket. And of course, echinacea is also known as coneflower or black-eyed Susan. So it is pretty to grow in your garden as well. All right, so right on top here, we've got some motherwort. Motherwort is something that would be a medicinal in the garden. And usually things that end in wort, it means that whatever the first word was, it is medicinally for that purpose. So motherwort, for example, would have been something that you would give to nursing mothers or like struggling mothers with a problem like bouncing back. It would help give them strength to be able to recover from the trials of childbirth, especially before modern medicine. St. John's wort, we still use that sometimes. It is, you can still go in any kind of drugstore or pharmacy today and find it in the supplement section. It's supposed to be for like depression and anxiety. Fun fact about St. John's wort that they might not tell you is if you take this as a supplement and you also, for whatever reason, take oral hormonal birth control, and it may apply to other forms of birth control as well, but it will interfere with it and cause it to not be successful. So, fun fact. Valerian. Valerian is something that is supposed to have a calming effect if you were to process the roots of the plant. And the way I always remember its purpose is valerian, Valium. It's because they're kind of similar. And even today you can find supplements, a lot of the sleep aids, the natural sleep aids in the pharmacy that don't have melatonin in them have valerian root in some form or fashion. All right, wormwood. That's another one that's purpose is in its name. Wormwood is used to, in our time period that we represent, it's used to get rid of worms like intestinal parasites. You also may have heard of wormwood because it is what gives absinthe its flavor. They don't put wormwood in absinthe anymore, and I don't recommend that if you have intestinal parasites, you treat yourself with wormwood because it is toxic. If you give yourself too much, it will make you ill. It can even be fatal if you were to really overdose on it. So tread lightly with wormwood. Got some more beets. These are bull's blood beets, really red flesh beets. And there's a cool recipe that we make from time to time that is pink pancakes, essentially. You boil beets and you smush them down in a mortar and pestle, and you use the beet juice off of that to make pancakes that are pink. And it's a really cool recipe. Woad. That is something that will be in our dye garden because woad and indigo are similar usage. Both of these are really old, thousands of years old. Before European folks found out indigo was used for blue dye, they were using woad for blue dye. So if you've ever seen the movie Braveheart, the blue face paint that the Picts use, that was woad. And indigo, although Europeans caught on to it later, indigo was being used in Central America, Mesoamerica, by the native people for thousands of years for blue dye. So both really, really old forms of getting blue. Some basil. Everyone loves basil in the garden. You may not know that basil is good to rub on bug bites. Like if you've got a mosquito bite and it's itching you to death, take a fresh basil leaf and rub on it and it'll take the itch out of it. And of course it tastes good for cooking. Caraway. There's a few recipes that we enjoy making that involve caraway seeds, different types of biscuits and what we would call cookies, they would call cakes. And so that's a good one to have in your 18th century garden. Parsley freshens the breath. A lot of the recipes will say to use your favorite blend of sweet herbs from the garden. That's a good one. Rue, that's another herbal. It could irritate the skin, so you have to be careful with it. Sage, that's a good flavorful herb to grow in the garden as well. We're almost there. We've got one more little clump of seed packets. Salad Burnet, that's a good one. You can put it in salads. We keep it in our medicinal section of our garden, our herb garden, and it has a medicinal value. I honestly can't remember it off the top of my head. I will have to look it up, and I will put it either in the description or in the comments. So if you're interested in knowing what on earth salad burnet was used for. Chives are always fun. I'll give you that oniony flavor. We grow that in the herb garden. Foxglove, also known as digitalis. You have to be careful if you're growing this because it is toxic to pets, cats and dogs. If they eat it, it will make them very ill. It is also bad for people if you don't need it because digitalis, foxglove, was some of the first heart medication. So if you don't have a heart condition and for some reason you are compelled to eat foxglove, it can be harmful. Nasturtiums. We've got lots of nasturtiums. They are a peppery flower that you can add to salads and stuff, similar in taste as far as that peppery, kind of spicy effect that you get like from arugula and watercress. Marshmallow. Some of the first marshmallows were made out of the plant known as marshmallow. And it's something that medicinally they would use for like tummy aches, and sometimes depending on what part of the plant you use, you get different properties, and so marshmallow could also be used for cough. Sunflowers, that's something that will be growing in the enslaved folks' garden. Sunflower seeds, of course, taste good, and they are high in protein, and you can process them for the oil. Hollyhock is a flower that we grow in the herb garden. That's another one that the medicinal value of that escapes me. I know it's really pretty, but it did have a medicinal value. Again, I'll have to look that one up and put it in the comments. Cypress Climber, purely decorative. It's one of the few things that we do just frivolous. It's pretty. It is a really tiny red flower that is like a morning glory almost, so you have to be careful. It can be invasive if you don't knock it back. But instead of having the similar leaves of a morning glory, it has these very fine, like ferny sort of leaves. So it's really, really pretty. Cilantro. European folks were not in the habit of growing and using the leaf of cilantro. We grow it and we make sure that we get the variety that will go to seed, because coriander, the seed for cilantro, is what they use in a lot of their recipes. And one of my all-time faves, gomphrena is what you would call it today. In the time period, they'd call it amaranth. It is something that we grow in the garden as a stewing herb. So you could put it, crush it up and mix it with other herbals to cut down on things that luckily we don't have as hard a time with now. Things like fleas and stuff like that. You would put it on the floors in different areas to cut down on fleas and lice and stuff like that thankfully we don't have as hard a time with today. But one of the reasons why I like to grow it, not for its strewing herb usage, but because it's really, really beautiful. It starts off as this kind of a fuchsia purple, and as it ages through its season, it turns really pretty bright white. And the flowers, if you hang them up to dry, are what you crush up to put in the strewing herb mix. So amaranth is a pretty one, and we love growing it. All right, any questions for us at all, please leave comments down below and we will get to them as soon as we can. And again, come visit us in person. We would love to answer any of your questions about gardening that you have in person. And if you're just too far away to make the trek at this time, then like I said, we would love to answer your questions online. So thanks for joining me, appreciate you, and we hope to see you soon.